Hello, today I'm joined by my guests from the Pattinson auction panel. We've got Mr. Richard Webb from Pattinson Auction. How you doing, Richard?
Very well, thank you, David. Thanks for asking. And you well yourself?
All good, thank you. All good. We're joined by James White from Belong. How you doing, James?
I'm good, David. Thanks for having me on.
We've got Double Trouble from Sarah and Amy at Panda Property. How you doing, guys?
We're good, thank you.
And last but not least, we've got Dan Frogley from Beals. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, thank you. All good. Right, well, we're all here because we're all, even me privately, mega fans of Pattinson auctions, or we've used them previously. And I'm always astounded at how difficult it is to sort of broach the subject of auction very often, because we as sort of agents selling properties in the UK have never really relied on it as heavily as perhaps we should do, but it does offer a great amount of efficiencies. And so it's just interesting to me to learn how you guys approached it from the beginning and how you managed to sort of integrate it into your businesses. Was it a very new concept that you needed to get to grips with in terms of from both your side, but also educating your sellers as well? So if you don't mind, I'll start with James. James, tell us a little bit about your use of it.
Oh God, well, my dalliance with auction goes back a long way to my previous business, where I tried to persuade my previous business partners for years and years and years to do auction because the benefits are numerous, and not least really the security of a sale once you've agreed the sale and have that immediate element of contract exchange and with a 28-day completion. I think people are scared of auctions on the basis of the price that they might achieve for a property, but what Pattinson has proved to us is that not only do we get closure, but quite often we end up with the best price for a house. We've sold a number of properties through Pattinson's where the buyers come from much further afield than our trading area, and they've paid a higher price than perhaps the local market would have dictated. So we managed to allay clients and actually colleagues' fears about that element. Colleagues, how did we convinced our colleagues to embrace Pattinson's largely through experience. They see it as being a very convenient, easy mechanism to get a property through from offer agreed through to exchange of contracts very quickly. We had one a couple of weeks ago where from putting the property into Pattinson's to exchange of contracts was a week, and actually it didn't come as any surprise to my colleagues. So they thought that was just fabulous, and that's why we do it. So integrating it at first, those two areas, so what's in it for the staff, what's in it for the team, i.e. the convenience, and also what's in it for the client really is the closure, and actually sometimes quite often the best price as well. So those two things I saw as the biggest challenges were actually probably the easiest things to overcome, really.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of education that needs to sort of happen process-wise, both internally to get buy-in from your own sort of staff members, if you like, and then you've also got different type of education, but answering pretty much the same questions, but from a consumer focus when you are selling this to potential clients. So Sarah and Amy, your business is slightly different. Everyone is different. How did you guys sort of integrate it into your offering?
We've been doing auction for a long time. I actually purchased a company that was already up and running and working, and we was already in partnership with Pattinson, so we continued the relationship. When I bought the company, I was more of a lettings background. I didn't really deal with sales a lot, so automatically auction was just so much easier for us in terms of they knew what they were doing a lot more than I did at that point. I've obviously come a long way, but it's just so much easier for staffing. We're such a small business, so we don't have sales chasing to do. We don't have a lot of processing to do. Obviously, we still have that relationship with the clients. We still bring them on, and it's quite easy to bring them on once you've explained how the process works. A lot of people think, oh, auction, oh, no, I can't do that. A lot of people purchasing it think they can't buy via auction if they're maybe a mortgage or anything, and people are really quite blind. It's available for everybody, and yeah, I think I completely agree. A bit of education is needed. We've been successfully working with Pattinson's for a good number of years now, and I've got no complaints. It works well. Amy processes it. She does all my marketing. She gets everything online. We've got clients that are maybe not very tech savvy. A lot of people still think that auction is in the old auction houses with a hammer, and it's like real life. You have to go and you can't buy unless you physically go to the room on that day. And yeah, it's interesting, and it's nice to be able to teach people and explain that it is there for everybody. Obviously, not every property is available for auction, not every seller is available for auction, but the majority are. And if you have that discussion with them to say if the price is right, obviously you can set a reserve price to, you can get that bidding more, you can see what the top line figure is. It's more open where that everybody can see what the current bid is, so they can then add more, bid more, offer more, rather than everything being silent and secret and nobody knows what position the property's at.
Thanks for that. I mean, it does sound like it delivers a lot of efficiencies, and still that sort of, you need to go out of your way to make that clear to everybody. Dan, obviously your experience with this, I mean, we're in a marketplace that isn't quite as auction friendly as, say, the Australian market is, where it's always been a common method of sale over there, and it has a touch of sort of glamour to it all. How do you find it in terms of sort of getting it across to your customers?
I think it's echoing what both James and Sarah have said. Really, it's educating your client. It's, you know, and buyer as well, because like Sarah just said, there are scenarios where you find yourself a bit like a broken record at times, sort of explaining it over and over again to various sort of clients. And once they get to grips with it, you know, the benefits are there, and they are clear. And again, echoing, you know, the transparency element of it, they can see where the offer's at. So, and much the same with the speed. And we've had some huge successes, and similar to James, really, what he'd said in terms of properties that you probably wouldn't think would go through, one, as efficiently, two, obviously to get the net price for the seller. So it's been, you know, a great process. And obviously for us, we're a sales and lettings business, so we've got sort of landlords who have got portfolios. We've recently just sold some properties where they've got sort of mixture of property, so some of it might be commercial, some of it might be residential, and it does create for them an opportunity where they can sort of, you know, work with us through Pattinson to be able to obviously get the end goal. And as I say, you know, once the legal pack's in place, we've, like James, have had them go through very quickly. So yeah, it's been a positive experience.
Well, that does interest me, because timelines in terms of our process of pushing sales through, pipelines and all of that is something that dominates our press headlines quite a bit, and has done since, you know, solicitors tend to sort of take quite a bit of flack in the press in terms of how quickly they get through conveyancing. And everywhere that you turn online, somebody will tell you it's about being prepared. It's about getting your sellers prepared to list as soon as possible. But the auction process sort of delivers that efficiency almost up front, doesn't, as part and parcel of it. So Richard, I'm going to just ask you to step in here. I know you've been watching there in terms of what people are saying, but I think there's 2 points over here. There's some major efficiencies in terms of speed, but there's also that point here about what type of property goes to auction. I think there's a myth, if you like, out there that needs dispelling slightly, that auction properties are only one type of property. It's something that is, you know, perhaps run down or distressed, or something that you wouldn't dare put into a regular private treaty process. And what we're hearing is that simply not the case.
I think it's interesting that all three contributors there commented in regards to the education. We very much position ourselves as a service provider for 3 customers in essence, and that's the agents, our partners, their clients, the sellers, and also the buyers. So we've got 3 clients which we have to please and which we have to ensure that the journey is simple, transparent, as Dan alluded to. But fundamentally, it's about the education. And the first step there, and I've been with Pattinson almost 7 years, and it's fair to say that 7-year journey that I've had with auction, it's very much a case that more and more agents now are understanding the process. They're more and more willing to embrace it, more and more willing to, I suppose, to harbour the auction process and the auction model, because they realise if, and I don't want to sound out of turn here and speak for the 3 voices on camera, but if they don't offer it, the chances are one of their competitors will, because more and more agents are now taking it on board and using it to the best of their abilities. James mentioned about the education of his colleagues and his peers. And it is still a bit of a battle, for want of a better word, in regards to lots of agents are still unsure, they're still nervy, they're still believing that the quintessential auction property is what Beyond Dublin looks at on a Tuesday morning on BBC, on Homes Under the Hammer episodes, and it's not. Dan knows, James knows, and Sarah knows that it's not just those rundown quintessential properties that we believe are for auction, it is anything. So that then leads us on to the education of the seller. Now, we need to ensure that the seller is on board for the process. Now, if you've got a seller who's got a typical 3-bedroom, semi-detached family home that's in good order, but they've had an aborted sale, for example, and they want to resurrect that sale because they've got an onward move, auction is right for them, because it can give that timeline that is suitable to their needs and their requirements and their wishes. And in the same token, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So it's good for the seller, it's also going to be good for the purchaser as well. So again, it's about the education of 3 fronts. And again, it's our partners, the agents, the sellers, and of course the buyers.
Maybe just turning to the agents for a second now for a bit of feedback on that. It's interesting because I have the great privilege of speaking to a great many different non-competing agents up and down the country pretty much on a weekly basis. And one of the questions that I keep asking them is, you know, how's your market? What's going on over there? And one of the things that everybody, regardless of what their micro market is like, but the story that everybody's telling is that it's slightly more jittery out there. It is harder to keep a sale together from start to finish. And fall-through rates are increasing, and you would expect that in the sort of economic climate that we've got. You've offered us some statistics, which is that you're still experiencing a less than 1% fall-through rate in auction compared to, say, 35% in the open market. I suppose protecting your vendors, your sellers from aborted transactions is part and parcel of the advice that you guys give, but how effective do you think it is? Open question to anybody.
I'll let the agent speak.
We think it's really, really effective. Things go through so much easier, so much quicker. You don't have to hassle. Sales, obviously, if it's somebody purchasing that's via a mortgage, you can extend the sale period so it's a little over your 28 days, but that's all negotiable. It's all at the vendor's decision, the vendor's acceptance. So they know exactly where they are. You're not going to have surveys that come back and say that you've got all these works to do and then you've got a potential sale fall through. It's just done and dusted. It's clear. It's black and white. There's no argument, and it's so much easier for people. We have a couple of vendors that are, it's not your typical vendor. Like we have one current going through at the moment that's partner's passed away. She's never dealt with the property. She doesn't have a clue, but she's so stressed and anxious about it. And auction's the way to go for her because there's nothing hidden. It's done. She doesn't have to worry about it. It's just dealt with, and it's simple. Rather than getting the stress and anxiety of having something go wrong halfway through the chain or something fall through, it's just clear and cut and good. It's not, we do broach the subject of auction with every single person that comes on the market with us, because it isn't just for the typical investor, it's for anybody, and it is just so much easier, quick and more efficient. We do auction more than normal sales on the open market.
I say that, do you know, that is something that Richard and I have discussed several times previously, is that when we as agents go out to visit our prospective customers, we're there to sort of give them a bit of advice. So where the house may sit in terms of you know, value in that particular marketplace, what we can offer them as agents. But there's a sense that we're not telling them the full truth and everything but the truth if we're not making auction available to them as one of those routes to sale. James, do you sort of see that?
Yeah, I mean, it forms part of our general discussion with the client now. All options are on the table in a market like this. I think just touching on what Sarah was saying, and expanding on one element is the buyer as well. The buyers that are coming forward to auction, they seem to be more along the lines of, I've seen it, I like it, I can afford it, I'll buy it. And the minutiae of the legal pack is dealt with upfront, and is a lot more convenient for people like that because they can make a quicker, more informed decision. And it's that element really that helps to get them over the line too. And once you explain that to a vendor client, the vendor will buy into it more as well, because of course one of the things that's been the big hesitation throughout the whole house buying and selling process in this country is cost. So people have been reluctant to commit to costs because of the uncertainty of the process. So I'm not going to pay for my searches until my mortgage offer's back, for example. Being a perfect example of a delay in the whole process, whereas all of that's taken care of up front with auction, isn't it? So the cost, once you've persuaded your client that the costs are worthwhile, and of course, certainly if you're using Pattinson's legal pack, elements of that are on a no sale, no charge basis too. So you know that can help to remove those anxieties for a seller. So long as you can get the property into the right price point, so long as you can get the right mindset from the seller, there are buyers out there who are, can we call them point and shoot buyers, who like the certainty of auction because they want it, they can afford it, and they'll buy it. So you know, as long as there's no real skeletons in the closet with the property that come up on the legal pack, usually it's very straightforward.
Dan, is that similar to your experience as well? Are you introducing it sort of straight off as an option, or is it something that you offer later on if you feel that a particular seller needs that approach?
I think it's offered on pretty much all occasions. There might be the odd scenario where you're sort of fighting to win the instruction, so you'll take it at all costs, as it were, and then if there's an opportunity to revisit it down the line, we would. But yeah, generally we would offer it to pretty much everyone, to be honest with you. And again, taking on board what others have said is a similar experience to us in respect that when we do get the properties come on, you know, the buyers are the key thing in this, because like you say, you know, you've got interest rates that are continually rising, all these sort of, you know, areas that are going to lead to potential fall throughs. Going back to the speed element, the financial commitment from the buyer, if nothing else, you know, they have got that legal pack available, they can make that informed choice. And you know, again, similar to what Sarah said, there is the flexibility element, and to be honest, it's a bit of a learning curve for me and our colleagues as well, because every vendor's different, every property's different. So when we are on this journey, we are going through this process, there are situations where you think, oh, actually there's a solution for that, and Pattinson's and us collectively work together to come up with a solution that works for everyone. You know, whether it be a slightly delayed completion for one reason or another, to facilitate a mortgage, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, it is, I like the idea of it, because I think, you know, the private treaty sale, you know, you're seeing how long things are taking. And I just like the fact that from a buyer's viewpoint and from our viewpoint, you've got that pretty much, you're assured that the sale's going to go through, all bar 1%, as Richard said, because of the financial commitment aspect.
It's amazing to me, actually, because we always, I mean, we tend to look at things from a seller's perspective, because that's who our paying clients tend to be. But really, when it comes to being a buyer of a property, many of those buyers, unless they're habitual sort of buyers who do it very often, and in which case you may be looking at investors and so on, your average person doesn't buy a property that regularly. And when they come to the process, they need a little bit of education. They have no idea what it's going to be like. But the one thing that I'm always not surprised at, but disappointed at sometimes, is that when they do come to the process, they always find it's slower, that there are less answers to the questions that they need and that they have along the way, because so much of that upfront information that you tend to get in an auction pack, we're no good at providing in regular sort of retail estate agency. There are those of us that do it, but again, you know, as I think James said before, there's that reluctance sometimes from a vendor's point of view to commit to actually, you know, putting searches out or starting work on a contract before they've actually got a buyer that is committed, and so on. So from a buyer's point of view, there is some reassurance to this process because it gives them a fixed timeline, doesn't it, in terms of a beginning, middle of an end to an auction process, but it also gives them all that information up front. Do any of you feel any sort of resistance from buyers when you suggest that, you know, that they have to buy it in an auction scenario as opposed to sort of regular private treaty?
Can I just jump in there, please, David?
Sure.
Just before anybody answers that question, one thing I would like to comment on, bearing in mind we've got agents from an eclectic mix of locations across the country, from the East Coast to West Yorkshire down onto the South Coast as well. It's interesting that they're all saying the same sort of thing in regards to the tailored aspect of what we try to offer at Pattinson. What a lot of people tend to believe with auction, it's very much a case of cut and thrust. When you accept a bid, that's done, you're exchanging, completion set. We're very much of the belief that we understand that people do change. Buyers are not necessarily married up straight away to the seller at day one. So it's about us to see if we can tailor things, if we can match things up, if we can make ends meet together. And we'll work with our partners on that. And that's one thing we again, go back to that education process again, in regards to buyers and sellers, and also the agents, is it isn't a case of this is the legal pack, this is the contract within the legal pack, that's it. It can't be molded in any other direction, not at all. If we have a buyer that does require a little bit of time to get their finance in place, or they need to oversee a related sale, we can work with them. We can work with the buyer and seller. And as Sarah said at the very beginning of this discussion, if the seller's on board with it, because fundamentally the seller is the one in control of this whole process. If the seller's on board and they buy into what we're offering them, then we can move things forward in accordance for everybody. So everybody's aware from day one. Everybody is aware when the exchange is taking place, and importantly, when completion is going to be happening.
No, that's great. I think that's very reassuring to be in a position where you can put your client in control, especially in property transactions. Once we hand over sometimes to a solicitor, it sort of slips into that ether and people don't hear back for a while, so they don't feel as in control of that process as they did at the beginning. But this is probably a method of sale where you can benchmark your progress up to the minute, and you'll know exactly what's been done and what hasn't been done. From a buyer's point of view, going back to that then, from a buyer's point of view, is there any resistance? Because sometimes the arguments that people give you about why you shouldn't utilize auction is that buyers don't like to be put into that process. But some of them find it absolutely reassuring. So I'm just wondering what the agent's perspective is on that.
I think if I can go first, just on that, probably the only two areas of hesitation I can identify at the moment, really. One are buyers who've not yet put their house on the market, so they're not really in the market, and the other is the buyer's premium, having to pay, you know, a deposit at the outset. Is foreign to a lot of people. It's again part of the education, the learning curve, that it's actually a different process. The advantage for me, for a buyer, really, is that they get certainty. So sellers who are entering the auction arena are not sellers who are likely to change their minds after 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of a process. They're actually certain about selling the house, so it gives the buyer some additional comfort, that not only once they've exchanged contracts or when they've signed the contract, that it's theirs, but even before that point, they know they're dealing with houses that are actually having to be sold, or there's a genuine seller behind the transaction. Because let's face it, post-pandemic, post-lockdown 1, we were finding as many sellers were pulling out of sales as buyers were withdrawing, because sellers couldn't find somewhere to move to.
Yeah,
the house would sell surprisingly quickly, and they'd panic and then take the house off the market. There was a lot of that. So this removes all of that as well. So I think, again, coming back to education, but it provides a lot of security for the buyer who does this process, because they're dealing with people who not only agents, auctioneers, but sellers who genuinely want to sell. So I think there's a real advantage there as well.
Agree fully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we often overlook sometimes, don't we, that when we think about fall throughs, you may think about a buyer withdrawing their offer and walking away, but very often it can be the seller that has a particular issue, or they have a change of mind. So I suppose it does it's reciprocal, isn't it? It goes both ways, and it gives everybody that reassurance that they need and want. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you all, and Richard, you can't comment on this, I'm afraid, but I'm going to ask you all about your experience with Pattinson, because if you've never done, some of you very experienced with auction, and I get that, but if you've never done it before, you're going to need some resources, and you're going to need to market this in the right way. What I was particularly impressed about was that my sort of in-house team were backed up by a team at Pattinson's who were every bit as knowledgeable and every bit as focused on getting our deals through as we were. And it felt all of a sudden that we sort of had this much bigger team that we were part of in selling these properties. And I have to tell you, not only did I feel that as the selling agent, but also my clients did as well, because they had sort of two sources of backup. People that were giving them information, but I was particularly impressed with sort of the support from Pattinson's from day one, in terms of the amount of literature and different marketing materials available as well. So yeah, Dan, do you want to tell me about how that sort of fits in with your business?
Yeah, I think Pattinson, obviously they will jointly list the property, so we have the benefit of both their database, our database, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, we've had first-hand experience where Pattinson have successfully found a buyer without the need. They've introduced them to us, and then we just facilitate the viewing, and we've had the result. So again, would that have happened without that applicant on our database? Would they have inquired about the property from our listing, knowing that they live hundreds of miles up country? Who knows? But I know some of these clients that they've got are people that they work with closely quite a lot of the time. In this particular case, was all about investors. But in terms of marketing, yeah, by having it on twice, we are generating a lot more inquiries on the property, and obviously, they've got their own sort of marketing material alongside what we would do generally anyway. So yeah, I think the partnership works really well in generating just as many leads. And going back to the previous point, it's just a case then of just trying to nurture those buyers and make sure that they are educated on the process, so that you're not wasting too much time with people that are completely unaware of the process, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And Amy, Sarah told us that you're sort of responsible for a lot of the marketing there. So you've got that backup from Pattinson's. How do you find it?
I really enjoy working with them. A lot of the time I call them for advice on things, and they give me everything I need. You have the same people to deal with every single day, don't you? So they're almost like friends when we do like activities in the office, like charity events and stuff. Pattinson's are included in that. They're part of our team, and it's good to have that bigger workforce. And in terms, they've brought quite a few clients to us, haven't they? Yeah. Purchasers that have stayed on with our land, stayed on and did rentals with us and stuff. So it's been very profitable for our business as well as for them. It goes both ways.
Because purchasers presumably may sort of stay with you, rent those out, become landlords and so on. So it's a good way. I hadn't actually thought about that, but I suppose being with a national auction does bring you a much wider pool of buyers, because when you're marketing locally, it tends to be to your patch and your audience. But yeah, definitely. All of a sudden you take the gloves off and you've got the whole of the UK there.
And we can rely on the staff at Pattinson. The team that we work with are really good. They know our services, they know our products. They're not there to sell us, but they tell them, the purchasers, a little bit about us, and they introduce that relationship between us and them. So then we've got the opportunity to sell our services. So it's every bit more of a benefit for us.
Fantastic. Richard, this must be music to your ears.
I think I've got to give out a lot of fivers today, haven't I? No, it's a joking aside. It is great to hear, because fundamentally that's what we consider ourselves to be, as an addition to any estate agent's reach in regards to their sales offerings, without the need for that agent to alter any software, to employ additional staff, to to extend the office space, anything along those lines. That's what we're there to do. And you mentioned it, David, in regards to the backup team. We have a team of business development managers, which I know Danny looks after Sarah and her team, Emma looks after James, and we've got Sarah looks after Dan down on the South Coast as well. But it goes beyond the whites of the rye sort of care. It's the guys up here at our head office, where they're dealing with the sellers and the buyers and the marketing and so on and so forth on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, time and time again. And you mentioned about I suppose the assurance you get from the fact that everybody comes across as being fully educated on the process and be able to give the answers that you seek at any time. And that's again what we strive to deliver. We want to ensure that our team, whoever you speak to, can give you confidence that your client is in safe hands. And fundamentally also that the seller, when they speak to anybody in the team, they feel they're in safe hands, and that the buyer, when they speak to any member of the team, they're being advised accordingly by somebody who knows how to give the best advice for that particular individual.
It's fantastic, and like I say, I've tried it firsthand, so I know what it can bring to the table, and it continually sort of surprises me that agents don't embrace it. The other week, and we were out at the Property Mark conference, and I was chatting to Richard, and as I was there talking to him, some random person just walked past and said, "Oh, Pattinson's, I sold my mother's property with you guys." And the comments that they were giving and sort of the praise that they were giving, particularly around the price achieved and the speed of sale, to me is myth busting in itself, because there used to be that sort of misconception out there that auction was always sort of discount to market. And in actual fact, a lot of the people I speak to tend to find that they're able to sort of achieve a figure beyond their dreams and beyond what they assume the market level was at. So it's great to hear that feedback sort of firsthand.
It's really interesting on that point. Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. I met with a local solicitor on a golf day, actually, about a month ago, and his mother-in-law's property came across my desk. He brought it to me, and I recommended Pattinson's approach, and they declined it. This is going back a year, and when I met him about a month ago, he said to me, "I wish I'd have gone with you." They actually got £24,000 less with their chosen sale method than we were expecting to achieve on the online auction. So because we'd sold next door, it was only a little house, but we'd sold next door for 110. He ended up with 86,000 because of his chosen route to market, and he was absolutely gutted. But c'est la vie, you live and learn. So it can backfire on people as well. But we also sold a house in Huddersfield where we got 15% above any of the local offers from a lady from Kent who bought unseen, which was quite interesting. So some people will buy up and down the UK because their perceptions of value are different, quite simply. She paid 125,000 for a house, and she couldn't believe it in where she was. It would have been 200 plus. So
yeah,
she saw it as a bargain.
And it is, and I think bringing that sort of national reach into your marketing has that effect of opening the door to buyers that perceive value differently and maybe have a different risk profile as well, because there are those classic buyers out there that are willing to go ahead and buy unseen, as it were. So it sounds like everybody's making good use of it in their business and highly recommends it. And I know that you're all very busy. Some of you have just come back from holiday, and some of you are trying to get away to some holiday as well. So I'm going to let you all get on with it. But I'd like to just say thank you very much to James, to Dan, to Sarah, and to Amy, and of course to Richard for joining us today.
Thank you, David, for the opportunity. And thank you to the three of you, or sorry, to the four of you for participating today. And we do value your comments and your, the partnership that we have with all of you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.